Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We'll be doing hidden gems in RentalResult. Our host here today is Alex Baer, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. He is our product manager for RentalResult. He's been with Win Systems for over 20 years, and he's done roles from developer to director of operations. He's really a master of the product. So he will be walking through some hidden gem features that you should be utilizing in your operations. And during the webinar, if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll ask Alex as we get those in. So let's jump into our agenda. We will be running through the copy branch feature, utilization inquiry, revaluing assets, and then at the end, we'll save a couple minutes for Q&A. So I will pass it over to Alex.
Cheers, Madeline. And okay, so we're looking at branch maintenance. I'm not sure how often everyone needs to use it, but there is a little known feature. Let me just make that a tad larger, that rather than hitting the add button and starting with every field being blank and having to do lots and lots of keying, we have this nifty little button, copy. So when we hit the copy button, we can pick one of the existing branches. I'm just typing in a code because I've been using this test branch in Phoenix since I moved here 20 years ago. But the regular selector's there. You can pick any branch you want. So it could be as simple as I'm creating, I don't know, let's go with code 102, and this could be my Tucson branch, which is probably going to be very similar to my Phoenix branch warehouse location. Or it could be that you have a template branch set up for the different types of physical locations. So those could be, I guess, sort of virtual laydown yards. They could be actual physical branches. They could just be for corporate accounting, costing purposes to save effort. Or it could just be like this, copying an existing branch. So we can see that it's picking up lots of information. In all likelihood, the manager may well be different, but even that's coming through default project and task codes for overhead costing. Cash draws, if you are accepting cash payments, very infrequent in the US nowadays, but again, could happen. All the payment methods, all of the analysis sets are defaulting through. Till postings, on-demand pricing on either one config, but useful nonetheless. And if you have a requisition approval hierarchy set up within the branch, that's probably one of the more complicated things to think about if you do this once every 6 months or every third year. So basically just a nice little convenience there. Hopefully not too many questions, as it doesn't happen too often, but everyone likes to grow and we love it when our customers grow too. So hopefully it will be of some help in the future. I think utilization inquiry was our next topic. So here we have the utilization inquiry. This is basically our quick visual. We originally developed it when we built, or just after we built, an overnight utilization rebuild routine that most of our customers have configured as part of the implementation or shortly thereafter to run on a nightly basis. And that runs through all of the assets on your system and builds this utilization data. So what am I? What status am I in? Was I rentable? Or ideally, was I on rent? To sort of help manage, track, analyze, report, predict utilization and trends. And it's a fairly simple tool, so I don't know why we have it labeled up as Regno, but it's the asset number or the E code. So I've just came in here for EC35, our item code for a mini excavator for my branch 101 for the last week or so. And I can see every asset and by day what status it was actually in. Again, being demo data, each row looks very consistent, as there was, I guess, not too much demoing or changing status of these items going on. But as you can see, we're going to track each day at the specific asset level based on the config that we've set up for this particular item definition that our EC35 mini excavator belongs to. we're going to track on a daily basis by asset its specific status. We can summarize this up at the item level, and I believe there's an option for group, but I may be lying. In fact, I think it is just item or asset. And again, it's the base granular data, the data, getting it down to the granular level. For bulk items, we typically want just at the item level. For anything that's serialized, uniquely identified, we're going to go with down at the asset level. Hopefully that makes sense. If you haven't used it, probably a good question or thing to do is to ask yourself if you have it turned on. The quick way to find out is probably just go have a quick look in the utilization inquiry, see if there's any data there. Also have a look at your item definition records and see how they're configured. They may or may not be appropriate based on current needs. But again, typically this would have been configured as part of the implementation, and there is a rebuild routine so we can go back and recreate missing historical data.
Alex, a quick question that we got on this is, for utilization, how do you know if it's turned on, the overnight routine is turned on?
It's actually a setting that you'd need professional services or customer care to check for you. So it's configured as an auto process. It runs each night on system startup. The theory being that there's very little activity happening at 12 p.m., 1 a.m. So I think the easiest way would be to log a ticket with the customer care team through service desk and just say, can you confirm I have the utilization auto process set up? And while doing so, confirm that it's running daily. And as part of that request, I just say, if it's not configured, please configure.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. Okay, asset revaluation. So obviously all assets within the system. I've just, again, came into our demo system. I'm looking, filtering in the asset revaluation screen at the primary asset register. So for anyone that isn't aware or doesn't remember from implementation time or just doesn't have any interest in that whatsoever, if you're in any way involved in accounting or asset management, you probably do care, but we can have up to 20 parallel asset registers. The primary one is always labeled primary. The parallel you set up by choice, and you give each one of them a name. In this case, we've got tax and bank asset register values. The only difference between these particular three is that the primary is what we are tracking internally in our item ledger and also in our general ledger. So if we revalue an asset in the primary asset register, it will also post to the general ledger that same revaluation. Equally, every month when we run depreciation, we'll do the calculation stored data for these two parallel asset registers, but we're only going to post to our general ledger for the primary. And if you're using an external costing system and we're passing out asset values as we purchase, sell, dispose, maintain, revalue assets, it's those GL postings generally that trigger the outbound integration to your external system. These we track, and it's typically more for reporting purposes, either for AMT minimal tax, I guess was the intent with tax asset register, or for different group roll-up mechanisms. So if you're owned by somebody in Europe, they'll have a very different way of calculating and valuing assets and how they depreciate to how we have to do it in the US based on the asset type. What this routine quickly does, is confuse me by allowing me to click off the thing from the drop down. So for any given asset here, we can see that this asset had a first period of depreciation of period 5, 2006. It was last depreciated in period 1, 2013. It cost us a spectacular $250,000, and it's taken depreciation of $250,000. So it's fully depreciated over those, whatever that works out, 7, 8 years. 6.5 if we perhaps pick something a bit newer. We have stuff with no last period. We haven't ran depreciation on these things. So if I was to double click on any one of these rows, I can update the narrative that was populated as default based on the goods receipt note and text entered. We can actually adjust the purchase date, which sometimes may need to happen. More importantly, we can adjust the depreciation method. This tends to happen fairly infrequently, generally just because of potentially an error when receiving an item, ordering it with the wrong item code, or more likely doing a goods in from work / inventory and bringing something in incorrectly at speed. But extending or shortening the depreciation lifetime may happen. And we can actually also adjust the first period that an asset, typically it's set based on the period that the asset's received in. But again, we can have setup that will allow you to only start depreciation after an asset's first been rented or final confirmation, etc. And then the last period is set automatically by the system every time we run depreciation. Hence, I know that even though we received this in September 2019, we apparently haven't run depreciation and picked this asset up because it doesn't have a last period, and it also doesn't have any depreciation calculated. If we were to say replace the engine in this particular mini excavator, we may have upped its value by $2,000. So we could come in here and just revalue it manually to $22,000. Ideally, what we'd be doing is doing that on a capitalizable work order transaction and consuming the parts for the engine, tracking the labor, etc., and having the work order completion actually post that same revaluation of the asset and post through to the GL. In a nutshell, I think that's asset revaluation. It's basically allowing us to manually perform updates for events that could have happened in the system otherwise.
Thanks, Alex. We have one question on that. Will reevaluations catch up and adjust for depreciation already taken?
Yes. So in this example, it's straight line. So it's going to take the net book value every time we run depreciation, which would be capital cost minus depreciation. We have 60 periods left. So it would take 22,000 over 60 the next time it runs, and try to do the math roughly in my head. It's probably about $300 and something a month, as opposed to the 295 or whatever it would have been at 20,000, or probably a little bit more. 3 times 6, 18, 20,000. Yeah, basically the system will true up. So if we revalue up, the amount of depreciation taken every month will increase so that we still get to the correct final value. With this particular configuration, it should get to 0 cost after, or 0 net book value after 60 periods. So if we had a net book value of $350 with 1 period left and we revalued it by 10 grand, were we to not adjust its depreciation lifetime at that point, which would probably you'd want to do if you were revaluing it as it was about to reach the end of its expectant life, we would take all of that revaluation the next time we run depreciation. It would catch up and true up. Equally, if we revalued it down in terms of its cost, or we increased its depreciation, depreciation would reduce or even stop depending on the volume of the adjustment until it caught up at some point in the future and then continue. And then if you want to be really clever, you could adjust first and last period and force a retroactive catch-up.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Alex, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.